all this crazy stuff. And I was talking to Zakia, and I was like, I want to teach people what they should have taught us in school. And so that's kind of an amalgamation of what this presentation is about. On top of that, we're going to talk about the basics of understandings of purchasing real estate and investing in real estate and why it's important, how it impacts you versus if you're a renter. Okay? So a little bit about me. I'm David Hussain. I went to UCR. That's where I got my bachelor's. I founded the ASA there. It was kind of a defunct group, and then it turned into a group of friends and misfits that still flourishes today. I was a project manager in software development and at ResMed and Solar Turbines, which is the local companies here. And then I've been a real estate broker since 2016. So I currently run a team of about 28 to 30 agents here in San Diego. It's a new budding team. It's about 2.5 years old. And I also work on flips, ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units, and then I also work on development projects where we take apartment complexes and turn them into larger apartment complexes or single-family homes, and we maximize its density capability and turn them into 7-story buildings or something like that. So that's kind of our specialty, and then I'm also a community leader here in San Diego in real estate and outside of it in a small neighborhood called Serra Mesa, and I host well over 50 events every single year. And then finally, I'm a son, brother, and Afghan. The most important thing in my opinion. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about the topic. We're going to talk about why it's important. We're also going to talk about the American home life cycle, where you can start, and in my opinion, what my teacher, Mr. Powers, should have taught me when I was in middle school. And then finally, next steps, and we'll jump into Q&A. I'm going to fly through this because I don't want to go over. And then the other thing is, you're going to have a lot of questions, I hope. And then we'll go through it that way. Make sense? I would rather have a conversational style seminar than me just talking at you like the Energizer Bunny for an hour. So let's proceed. So today we're obviously talking about what I just said. And we're going to address first why this is important, right? So all of this data is from the National Association of Realtors Research Group and Fortune Magazine and a couple of other studies that I researched when putting together this deck. So we're going to first talk about the difference. If you got to live somewhere, you got to live somewhere, right? Whether you're renting or owning, it's one of those two things. So ultimately, if you're going to be renting, you're typically going to have fewer households that are of color that own homes throughout their entire lives. And so that's part of it. So fewer low-income households and households of color own their home and are able to build wealth compared to other income and racial ethnic groups. And I'll show you that as we go on. And this is an important factor for the argument here. So moving on, the net worth of a homeowner is about 40 times higher than that of a renter. And I'll show you that exactly here in this study. What you can see here is in this table, the average wealth that somebody builds over 10 years is pretty significant. In different cities, you can see that homeowners are building, in the past 10 years from 2023 to 2013, they've built over 642,000 in San Jose, and then San Diego, for example, 346,000 over the last 10 years, whereas a renter would have just rented the property and lived there. Make sense? You're kind of beginning to see the pieces of the puzzle here. So, finally, the most important one, this one stands out the most, is the average renter spends about $330,000 in rent before purchasing their first home. And that is one of the most significant things here because at the end of the day, if you're going to live somewhere, why not make it your forced savings account instead of paying somebody else's mortgage or building somebody else's wealth? And then finally, when you own a property and it turns into an investment asset, this is something I'll dive into at the end of the session, it turns into a tax write-off. There's different tax strategies that you can utilize to write off your income so that you can keep more of your money instead of putting it into Uncle Sam's hands. All right? And yours? So we're going to talk about the American home life cycle. This is something this is literally a topic I wish I learned in school, just so that I could have a basic understanding of how this works. Nobody talks about this stuff, and I just figure why not talk about it. So most Americans own 3 homes in their life. Okay, they live somewhere, they live in 3 different, now I'm not talking about renters because they have a much more transient lifestyle. I'm talking mainly about, people that own homes and on average. So the first home is your starter home, the home you buy as a condo or a townhome where it's 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, 1 bedroom, 1 bath even, and it takes a very nominal down payment. You use either a FHA loan or a small down payment on a conventional loan, and you live there for about 3 to 7 years. Sometimes you have a roommate or a partner that lives there with you, and then you're typically between the ages of 25 and 35, all right? So then you parlay that property, or you turn that into a rental depending on your income levels. You move into your family home, the single family home, where you have your family, establish roots, and you stay somewhere long term. Okay, the idea here is that you build equity here and live here for about 10 to 20 years. On average, it's about 18 years that somebody owns this home before it transacts or sells or passes on to somebody else. And then normally you put down 20 to 50% when you purchase this property. Okay? And then finally, the age group is about 35 to 55 that purchases these kind of properties. All right? So, and then finally, of course, it's your twilight home. It's normally either like a single-story home or a retirement home, a retirement facility that you move into, or those like 55-plus communities that people, golf all day and stuff like that. So, and normally they do a 50% buy-in or like 100% buy-in on those, and it's between ages of 60 and 78, and that's where they spend the rest of their years. So that's the life cycle there for you. Oh, my bad, guys. This is so funny. This morning I was like, I can't forget to do this. Pull out your phones, please. This is so funny. Scan that QR code so that you can have this slide deck and you don't have to take vigorous notes. You can have the slide deck and everything else, that all my notes are in there as well. So please go ahead and scan it and keep it. I can't tell you how many times I reminded myself to make you scan this QR code. Okay, everyone's got it?
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Oh wait, I don't have it.
Too late. My brother, Abraham, everybody. Okay, so I gave you a basic understanding of the American home life cycle. Where do you begin? How do you start? What's the first steps, right? So I took a property last night from Redfin. I just went on there and I looked up a basic starter property, and I ran a case study on it. It's been on the market for 41 or 42 days. Really crazy side note, if you buy this property, by the end of the month, they're offering an annual membership to a gym that's $16 a month. It was the funniest incentive I've ever seen for purchasing a home. I figured I would just add it in because it was $16 a month. It's like $192 as the incentive to purchase this condo. So, total side note. You're 25 years old. You don't have to be 25. We can dive into this later into a case-by-case basis, but this is the idea behind kind of what I wanted to teach. Let's say you're 25 years old or wherever you are in your life, right? And you don't own a home and you're a renter, all right? So the idea is you purchase a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. You live in San Diego, and or you live in any city, and you identify a property that fits your needs. This property has parking. This property has washer dryer. It's got a living room. It's got a kitchen. All the things that you need to live, right? So it's ideally what you need to get into the game, and that's the most important part of this, right? So the idea is identify a property that fits your needs that you can afford, okay? And you're going to purchase this property for, let's say I wasn't your realtor, you would purchase this property for $45. If I was your realtor, you'd get it for much less. So it's been sitting on the market for 41 days. That's a significant problem, right? Anything that's been on the market for that long typically means that it's not moving, it's not desirable. There may be something wrong with it, but that's your advantage. And again, you don't need to live here long. You don't have to spend as much time as you want to here. This is your tool, okay? And this is part of the foundation that you're building for the rest of your life. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. So we purchased the home for $485,000. You need to get here. This is your goal. Get 5%. Identify 5%. And most people, believe it or not, they borrow this money from somebody. They know somebody, they talk to somebody, and most people are okay with it. Because there's like down payment assistance programs, but those are actually joint equity programs where the state or whatever, like non-governmental organization, whatever it is, joins with you and they own part of your property. And then when you go to sell it, they take their percentage share of equity. So it's not necessarily the best kind of partnership. Whereas you can just like partner with somebody and be like, hey, if you don't have the money, right? You can say, hey, I'll pay you X% by this time, when I go to sell this property. And it can just be a simple agreement if you don't have this money. But most people can get to this number within a couple of years if they really do put their mind to it. It's not super hard, okay? So those are the kind of assumptions that we're operating off of, okay? So if I was your realtor, I would negotiate something called a 2-to-1 buy down. Because this property's been sitting on the market, it makes more sense for the seller to give you a credit to get into this loan program than it does for them to sell it for like $40K less or $50K less. Because if they just give you $10,000 or $15,000 to get into a 2-to-1 buy down program, and I'll explain what this is in a second, you get the property for much cheaper from a payment perspective, and they get the number that they need to be able to move on and write the new chapter in their life. Okay? So what a 2-to-1 buy down program is let's say you're able to negotiate $15,000 in credit from the seller. Okay? And that $15,000 is put into a savings account that the bank holds, and every month they take a small portion of that savings account and they give you a 4% interest rate for that year, and then the next year it goes up to a 5%, and then the following year it goes up to a 6% interest rate. And the reason this is happening is you're basically giving them a little bit of money every single month that the seller gave you. This isn't even your money. The money that the seller gave you to write down your interest rate. Okay, so this is a strategy, one of the strategies that somebody that is a real estate professional will use to help you get into the game. Is anybody completely lost on this before I move on from it? So it's just a loan program that's cheaper than a regular loan program. Okay, go ahead.
Is it state specific or is it?
No, nationwide. Yeah, it's a Fannie Mae product, Freddie Mac product. It's a conforming product. But the seller has to provide you the concession. Like you can like buy the house for more and then they can provide it back to you, but you can't get this program. It has to come from the seller. Go ahead.
What is the downside for the seller?
There is no downside for the seller because they sell the property. Otherwise, like they can just sit. I always say a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. They can just sit on the market and wait for somebody to pay $485, or they can get $460 for the house or $470 for the house, okay? And they can move on with their lives and get that 3-bedroom. Most people are moving because they're pregnant. They're getting a new job. They're dying, unfortunately. They're getting a divorce, fortunately. Or like some significant life event. Hey, divorces are, in my opinion, actually a good thing. But I think that's a good thing because obviously that relationship wasn't working out. But that's neither here nor there. This is a relationship. Please don't ask about divorce. Go ahead.
Is it better to use those seller credits to buy down the rate or towards the closing cost of the other option? And the second part of it is, how much is it actually cost to buy that down, right, from a 2-1? Because it fluctuates on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
So today, in your experience, what is that going for?
It's always like a percentage of the principal balance. So normally it's like 1.25% of the principal balance. That's like the basic.
Of what it costs, right? The multiple factor or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So like let's, real quick, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we can totally chat about this afterwards and I can break it down. But like, let's say you're borrowing $430,000 on it times 1.25%. So it would be a $5,000 credit from the seller. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
But the question.
And the second question, I'll address it right now. It is better to get this because of what I'm about to show you.
Beautiful.
Mainly because I could also get you that too. Like this property's been sitting on the market for way too long, and most of the time sellers want to move things. Like I just got a call from somebody that I have a condo that isn't moving, and the seller's like, David, sell this thing. I'm like, okay, well, great. Have you heard of a 2-to-1 buy down? We need to offer this. So it's one of those strategies that you can use to. You're tapping into a buyer pool that can't afford to get into the market now, but the market's ever changing. So you're tapping into a speculative buyer, basically, a buyer that's hoping that the interest rate's going to get lower. Now, keep in mind, they do qualify for the 6% at this time, but their payment's just lower now because the seller's helping them. Make sense? All right. So your payment's going to be $3,421. This is principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and association fees. Not a food. So that's what your payment's going to be on this condo. And we've put down 25 grand. And then we had like 5 grand in closing costs and stuff like that. And this is at, I'm almost positive that I did this really late last night. Sorry, guys. But I'm almost positive that's at 4%. So remember, you're 25 or you're just trying to get in the game, so we're going to make one sacrifice here, okay? One sacrifice is you're going to rent a room. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's a force multiplier. You don't have to do this, right? But it's a force multiplier for a short amount of time so that you can get into a much larger property at a much higher number. I'm going to show you some numbers that are astronomical, but it's called compounding, and that's one of the things they should have taught us in school. Anyways, I'll talk more about that at the end. So your payment's going to be at 5%. The following year, it's going to jump up, right? If we don't refinance before then, your payment's going to be at 5%, and it's going to go up $300. Okay, it's going to go up to $36.94. At that time, you are getting rent from your roommate at $1,500, so your payment's actually $1,921. Okay, and then your appreciation at that year is going to be 40 grand, roughly. I'm always going to round up because that's my job. So it's going to be about 40 grand, and then your value this time next year is going to be at 523,800. All you did was live somewhere. That's all you did. And you had a roommate too if you wanted it. You didn't have to because you were paying $34.21 a month. But you made 40 grand living. That's like getting a second low-paying job. And all you did was live somewhere, okay? And then your payment does increase at $273 a month to $3,694 because the interest rate jumps up. It's a 2-to-1 buy down. So it goes 4%, 5%, 6% on the third year if you don't refinance. But the idea is that you refinance because rates at the beginning of the year were at 7.5%. Today they're at 6.125%. So, and you can refinance as much as you want, but the rule of thumb is to like refinance every 6 months because otherwise the banks will hate you for it. And then finally, at month 23, so in 2026-ish, like August, your PMI drops off at $300 a month. So private mortgage insurance is PMI. Anytime you buy something that's less than 20% equity on a property, you have to get something called private mortgage insurance. Write that down, look it up, not today's topic, okay? So we're gonna move on. This is year 5. I've fast forwarded your life, and this is how much we've made so far, okay? So at year 5, your value on this condo is $712,000. And remember, you still either have a roommate and your payment's at $1,900 or something, or lower if you've refinanced, or you don't have a roommate, now you have a partner and maybe they're paying. But keep in mind, or you live alone and you're happy, and then you have a $3,400 payment or lower if you've refinanced, right? And then your PMI dropped off way long ago, 3 years ago, okay? So you were saving $300 a month there. Your total equity here, how much did we put in originally? $25,000, right? And we got a seller credit. Yes. And then this is your total equity. This is your money, okay? And by that time, like the population has grown, desirability in that part of the neighborhood has grown. You're gonna get your condo sold most of the time. This is like a lot of assumptions here in San Diego. If you guys live in like Milwaukee, I don't know that market, so maybe it doesn't sell as fast, maybe it doesn't appreciate as much, but I'm just trying to get a message across, right? So with that said, you now have an equity basis of $290,000, okay? And your payment at 5% at this point, actually your payment should stay at 5% because at some point between now and 5 years from now, or four and a couple months, it should have stabilized at 5%. You should be able to do that because that's a stable rate in a stable economic market, and that's what I'm foreseeing. But if it goes haywire and it goes to 6%, your payment's going to go up by about $350, okay? Anyways, so this is year 5. Now we've decided to purchase a single family home. So I identified a property last night that is a single family home. How are we doing on time? Good? All right. I identified a property that's a single family home. This is 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's 1,800 square feet. You can look at photos later. Just click the link. But we're not going to do that right now. Like later tonight, just swipe on it. Anyway, so this is the house you're buying. It's $995 right now, but I adjusted it for 5 years from now. I went into a calculator. I did all the math for you, so you don't have to do it. In year 5, it's worth $1,461,000. Crazy to think that, right? But that's how things work. So you transfer your equity. It costs you about 50 grand to sell your condo. So you transfer your equity of $240,000 at year 5 into this property. You should probably have a partner by this time. You can have roommates at this time, but this is just based on you operating as a single person, okay? And ideally, this is the idea was people between 25 and 35 are still in their solid working years and making more money relatively every single year. So the idea in all of this argument is that you're still making more money every single year, therefore you can afford something like this. Now, if you're staying stagnant or staying still, you're just gonna have to want to make this happen. Am I making sense for everybody? But the idea is you're making more money every single year, okay? So your payment's gonna be at 6%. Because this is a larger purchase price, your payment's gonna be at 6% because you don't have 20% down. If you have, this is gonna be 16% of this amount, the 240,000. If your payment was at 20%, then it would be a lower interest rate. So your payment on this house is $9,000 in year 5, okay? It'll take you 6 months to reach 80-20 loan to value, which means you won't have any private mortgage insurance, your payment's gonna go down, and you could even refinance and get a lower interest rate because this is a very major factor in what interest rates are on your loan, okay? So interest rate's gonna go down in 6 months, PMI is gonna drop off, and so this number should be a little bit lower.
Can you also touch base on a couple of risks from buyer's standpoint?
Yeah, of course.
Because this
The worst thing that could happen is you could lose the house. But that's the worst thing that can happen.
Sure. What's close to worst?
You have to sell it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's pretty bad actually if you lose the house. But other than that, you get foreclosed on, you lose the house. Before that, you could potentially lose value on the home. That can happen. That's a very real risk. But at the same time, there's like bigger problems that we have to worry about if like the San Diego housing market is taking a dip or a major metropolitan city's housing market is taking a dip. There's like bigger economic factors happening at that time. So the idea is stay still. Don't sell, stabilize, and stay where you are while you can so that you don't take a loss. And at the end of the day, like you bought this house to live there. You're not there to like flip it or anything like that. The whole purpose is just have stability so that you have, I always say like, I want to stay in San Diego because I have superpowers here. I have a community here. I have people I can call. I know where to go and where not to go. I know who not to call. So I have superpowers here. So I want to stay somewhere. I want to go home and unlock a door and be safe and stable. That's the idea behind this house, right? So the reason why I'm saying this is like, if your house takes a dip, you don't sell it. The worst case scenario is you rent it out or you stay where you are and you look for a better job if you've lost your job at this point or something like that, because there are inherent risks with purchasing a home, which is economic based. It's rooted in the economy. Other risks could be like there are expenses. I haven't calculated expenses like renters also, but I got to tell you, we've lived in some really rough places. The landlords did not take care of them as much as you would as a homeowner. So there are expenses to own a home. Like I have a termite company or a pest company coming.
Are they significant?
They can be. So if you don't inspect the home, or if you buy a total fixer, or you buy something that's like pre-1940s and it hasn't been updated, a lot of the shelf life of those materials has come to pass. So you're gonna wanna get a new sewer line. You're gonna wanna like check the roof, obviously. You wanna check the foundation. If it's like a river rock foundation, that's like really 1920s and before, that's called contaminated cement. Like you wanna check for all these things. If you purchase a home that's a dog that has these problems, it's gonna continue being one until you remediate all of these things.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take
Sure.
much time, but who does the due diligence? Like when you...
It's your job as a buyer to do the due diligence, but it's my job as a realtor and really anybody that's helping you through this process to guide you through the right inspections to do. And in California, for example, we have a list, you get a disclosure list, and it says like, you can do anything from like a geological survey all the way down to a regular home inspection and a pest inspection. So then like you can check for radon, and we don't even have basements here. So like, there's all kinds of things you can check for and investigate. And then like, I always start with a general home inspection. Sure. And I have a guy that like crawls underneath the house and stuff like that, goes in the attic. And then he gives you a general home inspection, and then you then hire the specialists and go deeper into investigation. So if there's like a plumbing leak, or if there's like some staining on the wall, then we get a plumber out there, and the plumber does a deeper investigation. And then it just goes from there. And then we get bids, and then at that point we get those bids and we submit it to the seller and tell the seller, give us money.
Are those expenses included part of your calculations?
No, but those expenses are very nominal. We're talking about a couple $100.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and this is purchasing the home. I'm talking about ownership as well, because like it costs money to own a home. Like you're gonna want to put the lawn in there. You're gonna want to do these things. I have not calculated any of these creature comforts into this ownership. It's just for the sake of this argument, so that you can see what's happening. So we're gonna get back on track here. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more quick question.
Sure.
So you mentioned like 8% annual appreciation, right? Like for the last, I guess, I don't know if it's true for San Diego market, but like in some markets, the house prices went up like 20%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So how much as a buyer should we be concerned about that? Like where there are 20% year-over-year increase, that's going to be, there's going to be like, the market true up and the prices will go down and you'll lose that, equity.
Yeah, you should be concerned about it always. But the other argument I make is like, if the rents will go down if that happens, your payment's going to stay the same. The value of your property is going to go down. In San Diego, we've seen a considerably more than 8% every single year. So let's just use San Diego for example. Okay, it's gone up 12 to 15% on average every single year. I don't think that's realistic. I think that's called hyperinflation, and I don't want to use that as part of the equation in understanding this. But I also don't think, I don't want to invest in places that don't appreciate or don't have strong economic factors making those property values stabilize. Because property values are driven by three things: jobs, security, and education. Those are the main factors in these things. So I would mainly want to invest my money and spend my time in neighborhoods and areas that have that stability. Otherwise, it's a very risky purchase. I know I'm kind of like working around your answer, but you should definitely be worried about property values going down. But while they go down, you can either rent out your house or you can stay there. And the idea is not to sell. The idea is just to wait. It's a waiting game. And especially in these equity growth markets, like California is an equity growth market. Springsboro, Ohio is not necessarily a equity growth market. It's a stable, renters and owners market. But here, you're not going to make a ton of money on cash flow. You're going to make more money on equity growth and being there long term. Make sense?
Yeah, one thing I'm trying to figure out, like timing the market, like what is the right time to buy? And like a lot of people are speculating, like with the economy slowing down, prices are going to go down, and that's going to be like the right time. Like, economy is already slowing down, maybe like beginning, middle of next year, or you don't think it's going to be like significant dip anytime soon?
It's tough to answer that question because you're asking a crystal ball question. And every time somebody asks me this question, I say this: you have to make a decision that's right for you and your family in the moment. I got an off-market deal at the end of a hike, and I was tired, and I didn't even want to talk about real estate. And somebody said, "Hey, would you consider this for you and your family?" And it was an $800,000 home where homes are normally 1.175, and it was disgusting. And interest rates are at 7% for the first time in 4 years. So as a realtor, double hockey sticks, no, I don't want this, right? But when I began to think about it, I was like, hold on, I'm going to walk into $400,000 of equity, I began to kind of like think about it, and then I bought the house and I renovated it, and now it's worth way more than that, even more. So that's just because it made a lot of sense for my family at that time. We did not want to all live it together in a small 1,100 square foot home. We wanted more space. We wanted 2 homes, things like that. So it made a lot of sense. That's what you have to focus on with real estate. It has to make sense for you because housing is a critical infrastructure in your life. If you don't have stable, consistent housing, and you're not coming home to that all the time, it's chaos. Everything else is chaos. So you want to be able to have something that's stable and consistent. That's why I'm saying it's not about timing in the market, it's about time in the market. It really, and that's why I started with the American home life cycle. Because at the end of the day, if you don't start, when are you going to start? You're just going to wait, and like the worst thing that could happen is that you own a home, you can afford the payment. Don't be cash poor, like don't be house poor and things like that. Please don't go purchase a home that you can't genuinely afford and you can't feed yourself to do these things. But at the end of the day, I don't think waiting on the sidelines helps you unless you find like a really slamming deal. And you have to, like, I spend every waking, ask this guy, I spend every waking moment in the real estate industry for that deal. So imagine homeowners, I'm their conduit, it's much more difficult for them to be at the forefront of getting these deals and timing the market. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is like, if the market takes a crap, there's bigger problems at hand. You may not have a job. Not you, but one may not have a job. You know, there's different factors that are at play, and at that point, like, you're kind of up the creek at that point. You don't have any choice. You have to rent or whatever it is. So I personally think that it's much more important to just buy what works for your family and stay there as long as you can and buy something smart. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so it's year 15. You've been living in this single family home for 10 years, okay? You bought a home 15 years ago and it started with that little condo, and now it's year 15. Believe it or not, this is an actual calculator at 8% growth consistently. There are a few flaws in this argument, but we're going to ignore them. If everything works out perfectly, okay, and appreciation stays at 8%, and inflation stays at 3% every single year, all right, the 10-year value of this property, when you bought it 10 years ago versus now, it's now worth $3.156 million. That's real, if things continue going the way they go. All right? Your equity in this property is going to be $2.133 million. Okay, that's how much you own of this property. Now, the dollar is going to be worth less by this time because inflation is a real thing. So I adjusted it for like 3% inflation. It could be more, it could be less, but for the sake of the argument, this is how much less the house is, how much less your dollar value, your equity value is worth. So in today's numbers, your equity value has grown to $1.365 million. What did we start with?
25K.
Okay, so we've taken 25K into, you're getting a t-shirt later. You turn 25K into $1,365,000 adjusted for inflation in 15 years. And that's what I'm talking about. This is real. Like, I sell old people's houses all the time, and yes, they bought their home for like a goat and a camel back in the day, but at the end of the day, like, that's still going to happen. We're going to look back at some point and be like, oh, gas used to be 99 cents at Arco when we were kids, and now it's $7 a gallon, because that's something I say every single day, and that it's going to continue working out that way. You had a question in the back? No? Okay. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast?
These calculations, forgive me for interrupting.
Sure.
Factor in the 3 year of COVID that has escalated the rate of return at 30%.
At 30%, what do you mean?
You know how, forgive me if it's the wrong statement, like, in those 3 years, the market drastically went up, the housing, the real estate.
Yeah,
property
yeah.
value. So do we negate that factor and still, so for your calculations, does that remove the rate of return, right? It's not going to grow at 30% year over year like you did.
Yeah, at no point have I said that.
No, I was
Yeah.
just, that's a general question.
So, and
When they do set the calculations,
Sure.
you have to, they eliminate that, right? I mean, that's like just a caveat, not a caveat. Like, that's not going to happen ever again.
no, of course not.
Yeah, so.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, we have 8% for appreciation here.
Yeah, so normally, actually in San Diego, it's actually 12%. And so last year home prices have increased 15% since last year in San Diego. And 12% is average right now, which is ridiculous. And it used to be 6% back when I was young. But now I'm doing 8% for a basic average, a conservative average. And I'm basing it off of today's numbers versus numbers 15 years from now. Makes sense? Adjusted for a 3% inflation. Fair? All right, this is what Mr. Powers should have taught me in school. So a couple things that I had frustrations with were understanding taxes, understanding credit, utilizing leverage, and general financial literacy. These are, I'm going to do broad strokes here, but I want you to take this and at some point run into ChatGPT and be like, explain this to me. Because these are basic like things that they should be teaching us that I just don't understand. So why they don't understand, why they don't teach us. So the basics of the US tax system, including federal, state, local taxes, and how different types of income are taxed. This is very important for you guys to consider because I was a W-2 income like income maker in like 2017 and making great money. And nobody told me that if I started my own business the next year and took the leap that I would have to restart and I could not do taxes the same way and I could not get a loan. And I had to wait until I made the same money or more to be able to get that loan. So it's 2018. There's this house on Osler Street that I wanted that was like $750,000, and we could totally afford it. And I'm a 1099 contractor, and so I can't technically afford it. I can't get a loan for it. And so my point is, if you switch from W-2 to 1099, you cannot get a conventional conforming loan unless you make a ton of money. But even so, it's going to be a non-conforming loan, and it's going to be a much higher interest rate. So my point is, it's very important for you to understand the nuances of how to do taxes, and that when you do taxes, doing write-offs, it does impact, like most W-2 borrowers don't have to worry about this, but if you're a 1099 borrower, I didn't know for the first 2 years that I was writing off everything. Those were considered major losses. And I was literally on paper making like $11,000 when I was making way more than that really, but on paper I was making $11,000 and I didn't know that. So those are very important things that we have to know. So that's the second thing where I'm talking about is tax deductions and credits. When you own a home, this is what I tell a lot of my home buyers. You can write off the interest that you're paying for owning a home. This is something I did not calculate in my calculations because that's a whole different rabbit hole. But if you pay $25,000 to $30,000 in interest every single year in owning a home, you pay that much less in taxes. Does that make sense? You make $100,000, okay? They tax you $30,000 or $40,000 of that. You basically tell them, hey, I paid $25,000 in interest this year on my mortgage. They say, okay, then you get taxed as if you made $75,000. Making sense? Yeah. Okay, you don't get that as a renter. And nobody tells you that. I wish they told me that. So filing taxes, how to properly file taxes, raise your hand if you use TurboTax. It's okay, I won't shame you. Shame on, no, I'm just kidding. No, if you use TurboTax and you make over $150,000 a year, it is very important to explore getting a CPA. If you make over $80,000 a year, it's very important for you to get a CPA. And the reason why is because at some point you're going to make more money. You or your partner or your family, somebody's going to make more money. It's important for you to understand the nuances of tax, and the only people that know them better than you are CPAs. Now make sure you hire a good CPA. I've been through 4 of them. It's like a really complicated relationship. Find somebody that comes highly recommended.
Do TurboTax.
Sorry?
Just do TurboTax.
Do not do TurboTax. No, don't do TurboTax. TurboTax is a joke. Sorry. Benefits of homeownership, we've already talked about that. But the last thing I wanted to tell you guys is I didn't actually know what IRAs and 401ks and SEP IRAs were and Roth IRAs were. Raise your hand if you know what these are. Okay, so a good portion of the room knows this. If you don't know this stuff, take a couple of hours and look into these things. These things are tax benefits. They're good for you because they compound in value. I'll talk about that in a second. But also, I live this way. Nobody's going to take care of me when I'm old, so I have to work for myself to take care of myself. That's how I look at it, right? And I see that because I take care of my parents a lot, but if they didn't have me and they didn't have my brothers, they would be homeless. And so that's really, really important to consider, because if you don't, I'm sorry I'm being a little too real, but like that's the reality of the world we live in. You know, you have to have money put away. You have to start now, and you have to start with a 401k or an IRA or some of these retirement accounts and just put a little bit away. Just start now, because what happens is these things begin to compound. Here, I'm going to compound, and compounding interest is crazy. I just showed you guys at year 15 what your equity value is based on compounding interest, right? So that's, now multiply that by like 65. God willing, you live to that retirement age. 60, it's probably going to be like 85 by the time we're at that point. But God willing, you live that long. The compounding interest from now until then, if you continue putting money into it, it gets crazy. It snowballs into so much more, and nobody teaches you these things. They don't help you look into the future. And if you work towards understanding these things, you begin to think about them more, and you begin to plan for it better. Okay, so I'm gonna go back 2. So taxes, okay. Raise your hand if you know what your credit like score is right now. Okay. Raise your hand if you knew what a credit score was in high school.
Oh, wait.
In high school. Okay. I didn't know what a credit score was, but my dad got me a credit card when I was like 15 years old, and it was like a $500 secured Wells Fargo credit card. And I spent the crap out of that thing right away, you know? I spent all of it. And my dad was like, but just you know, like, and he was like super mad at me, and it was all bad because it wasn't even my $500. Anyways, I didn't know that you had to make payments on this thing. So I destroyed my credit right off the bat because I didn't understand what was happening, right? Oh, but I was also 15 years old and a menace. So, but my point is, your credit is literally how the banks judge you. Like they literally just judge you based on how good of a person you are and whether or not they want to lend to you. So it starts with credit cards. Those are bad things. Those are not asset-based debt. Those are liability-based debt. And liability-based debt means you've literally just went and bought something at Sephora, and that's going to be gone, and it's not going to make you any, well, it might make you money, but it's not going to make you any money. And so now you owe money on that, and it's not going to appreciate. Okay? So an asset-backed debt or liability is a mortgage. Okay? That's good debt. That's friendly debt. We want to be that one's friend, right? That's the kind of stuff that banks look for, your capability and credibility to be able to pay back like good debt, okay? So my point in saying all of this is it's very important for you to use credit wisely because you can leverage it to borrow money and make that money make money for you. I just took out a loan for $800 and some thousand to purchase a home. I'm going to flip it, okay? I'm using another $100,000 to flip it, and then I'm using my credit for this, okay? And then I'm going to turn that into a couple $100,000 worth of profit. That's the goal. And I couldn't have done that without understanding my credit, okay? And it's very important to understand that you can use leverage and other people's money at a cost to make money for yourself. And then once you're in the real estate game and you own enough houses or enough rental properties, you can justify to the IRS that you run your own real estate practice, okay, because you own enough, and you can start doing something called cost segregation and accelerated depreciation. And these are crazy tax strategies that all of these people use. When you hear, why doesn't he pay anything in taxes and he's one of the richest people in the country, it's because they're using these kind of strategies. These are strategies made by the uber rich and uber wealthy for them. But they're available to us all if you just engage into it and work towards it. You can't just start using these right away. You do have to qualify for them. You have to work towards them. You have to, you can't use certain kind of depreciation strategies unless you're in real estate. Like, there's a couple different nuances here, but my point is if you work towards it and you understand it, you become aware of the boogeyman, then you can start working with the boogeyman. Is that making sense? Okay. And please don't be late on any of your payments. Like one time I was late on that Wells Fargo thing. It was the worst thing in the world. But I'll never do it again. It was a great lesson to learn at 15. And I also got the Chuck Black for it, so it was great. All right, so building equity, I've already talked about these things. I kind of briefly talked about the power of leverage. Finally, budgeting and saving. I wanted to challenge you all. Raise your hand if you own a home. Okay, raise your hand if you want to own a home someday now that we talked about it. Raise all of your hands. Okay, it's okay. Anyways, so my point is, I want you to go home today, or just think about it for the rest of the day. Use the pens that you got. If you didn't get a pen, make sure you grab one. Use the pens that you got to write down your goal of when you're going to have the down payment. And it doesn't have to be tomorrow or whatever, but ideally, you start doing this, because if you don't do it, you're just going to be a renter, and this is not going to be one of the ways you build wealth. You're going to have to build wealth another way. And it's much harder to find and go down those avenues and find wealth those other ways. Making sense? I like to bore myself into wealth, not like, I don't know. Anyways, so what do I do next? Pull out your phones. This is all very important. Everybody pull out your phones. I'm going to wait. Ready? Okay, you're going to follow Listed by David on Instagram. If you're already following me, unfollow me and then follow me again.
I'm sorry, where is it? LinkedIn?
Instagram. You can talk to me on LinkedIn too. It's just David Hussain. I think I'm Listed by David on LinkedIn too, the URL. Okay? And then I need you to complete your session evaluation. So if you're using the app, there are session evaluations at the bottom of every session eval. If you gain something from today, there can be a better version of today. This is the first one, by the way. There can be a better version of this for you and future generations at AAC. If you don't fill this out, I lose my funding. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any funding. But if you don't fill this out, there's no future generations that get to benefit from these things. And that's extremely important. I personally think Mr. Power should have taught us this. I hate that Mr. Hussain has to teach you guys this. And I barely understand anything. Go ahead.
I teach it in high school now.
Really?
My entire year's curriculum in one really well-taught lesson. So I think this was great.
Thanks.
Very,
I appreciate
very
it.
helpful, very informative.
Thank you. So what's your subject?
Session next
Yeah, can you teach me?
Are we collaborating?
Yeah, I needed a co-facilitator. I didn't want to do this by myself.
Next year.
Sorry, I should just intrusive thoughts.
Yes.
That'd be great.
I teach 2 high schoolers now.
Like everything?
Yeah.
Oh, they're so lucky. Good for them.
We do some investing. My first day of school activity is build your Barbie dream house. And then I give them their mortgage payment because they add pools and roller coasters. And
Oh, this, okay. I was like, why are we building Barbie dream houses here? This is not how I wanted to start this conversation.
No, but it's high schoolers. You gotta
Okay.
teach them somehow.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So
That's pretty cool. What's the class called?
It's economics and personal finance.
No way. Is it an elective or is it a core?
No, it's required in the state of Virginia. I don't know what
Oh.
it is in other states.
Yeah,
But I think it's becoming more popular to make it a required course in high school.
good.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah, cover everything.
And my school sucked growing up.
Retirement.
That's amazing.
It's happening now.
Yeah, that's
But It
good.
didn't happen for us. It didn't happen for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Then I'm here for you all. Sorry, some of you don't look like you're in high school, so I'm glad that I'm here for this. But anyways, the point is, fill out these session evals because I want this to be a core part of AAC moving forward because it's important. It's not just about investing in stocks and things like that. This is a basic, critical infrastructure of your life, which is building wealth through owning real estate. Okay? And then finally, this is your plan. This is your motivational slide right here, okay? So get your money right, figure out your budgeting, figure out your credit. If your credit's shot, fix it. It's okay. It happens. It happened to me when I was 15, okay? But like, it's gonna be okay. You have time to fix it, so fix it. Create a budget for yourself so that you can identify what money is going out, okay? And how you can save a little bit of money for yourself. When you're saying no to something else, you're saying yes to yourself, okay? And then finally, improve your credit. Make sure you get that squared away, but get to that first down payment. And that money's not yours, not until you're 15, okay? That money is your house's, all right? That's for your first job. And then buy what works. Don't look for the Barbie dream house, okay? Buy the Barbie condo. That's low income. No, I'm just kidding. But buy the Barbie condo, okay? And that's really important. And then finally, always know this, whether this is just in real estate or in your personal life, but nothing's ever perfect, and that's okay. It's gonna be fine. So create a plan, get to a 750 credit score. If you're less than that, you're considered a lower human being by banking standards. No joke. This is actual verbiage from bankers. I'm not joking. This is not me. And then save your 5%, because that's all you need for a conventional loan. You can do 3.5% for an FHA, but I think FHA loans are a scam. But don't quote me on that. And then finally, believe in yourself, because if an idiot like me can do all this stuff, you can too. Trust me. Go ahead.
You said FHA loans are scams, but then why do you have to pay a higher interest rate on a conventional loan? Or what are your other options aside from conventional?
I just think that FHA, like they make,
By the way.
so I personally think you can get a 3% conventional loan.
Yeah.
And the interest rate is higher, yes. But the PMI never drops off on an FHA loan, ever. So if you calculate your refinance cost to get into a conventional down the line, it actually is the same. I did the math one time and I was like, what the fuck? Like, anyways, so that's why I think it's a scam, but it's a marketing tactic. And they do that, the 3.5% first-time buyer home loan and stuff like that. But it does have its benefits. You can buy a duplex for a lower percentage rate. You can buy it with a lower down payment. You can't do that necessarily with conventional loans. I don't think it's necessarily holistically a scam, but in general, it doesn't have to be the only type of loan you use, and most of the time they're hawked as the only type of loan you use as a first-time buyer because banks make more money. Go ahead.
So, I purchased a home in 2017, and back then, people would tell me, you're a fool if you put a large down payment down.
Okay.
But the lease least amount of money down, right? Is that still true today? Because my philosophy has always been, the more you put down, the less your payment will be and the less interest you'll pay, especially with today's rates.
It's a really circumstantial question. I don't know your circumstances. I don't know what your threshold is for what you can afford in a housing payment. I personally like to be cash rich, and I have the capacity to have high balances every single month. To I'm like, I got to pay $10,000 this month instead of paying $7,500 or something like that. But the reason is I'm going to take that extra $50K or so and invest it into something that needs a cash infusion. Does that make sense? But most of the time, if your money is not better spent elsewhere and the opportunity cost isn't significant to put it in something else, then it makes way more sense to put it into your property. Because it is a savings account. Now, where do you own your property? That's also very important.
Orange County.
Put it into your property. You'll be okay. And you did the right thing. And is it still true for today? For the average American home buyer, the W-2 worker that's 9 to 5 and has a stable income in a stable industry, yes, it makes more sense to do a principal pay down and own your home for as much of your home as possible. However, if you have the opportunity to invest the extra cash into another real estate asset, you should do that. Absolutely. Because now it's a force multiplier. And you really want to do those kind of things, because if you can purchase a property that's in Tustin and you can put an ADU or two on there, now you're forcing appreciation on these properties and you're hacking the system. Now you're maximizing what you can do there, and now we're getting into an actual real estate strategy instead of just paying down your principal and having a lower payment and having more cash. Does that make sense? So if you have a better opportunity for the money, take the opportunity. But if you don't, then yeah, put it into the house. Go ahead.
So I'm seeing in the news that private equity is swooping in, companies like BlackRock are buying up single property homes. In this area, do you see companies that are coming in and taking those properties? Or?
Yes and no. Yes and no. But it's not as... we're getting too into the weeds with what I want to say, but I'm just going to say it. That's all clickbait. Everything that's on the news is clickbait. And they do that because it's sensationalizing something that's happening. But the reality is they've always been doing this. Equity companies have always been investing in real estate. It's not just this one time, BlackRock and things like that. There's a ton of other hedge funds that have way better PR to stay out of the news that do this every single day. There's something called the Delaware Statutory Trust. Look that up, DST. That's where you can be part of something like BlackRock and invest in 55 plus communities that take that Twilight Home thing that I talked about. To buy into a 55 plus community in San Diego, for example, you have to pay them $700,000 and a monthly rent of $7,000 a month. So, and what is it owned by? A DST that you can buy in and get residual income off of. So my point is, the answer to your question is this has always been happening. They're just talking about it now because they have your attention. Making sense? Any other questions? Abraham.
Who's that guy?
Which one? This is me when I had hair. I wanted to show you guys. This is me when I had hair back in the day. I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. These are my friends. This is from the second AAC at UCLA. That's fun stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys?
I don't have a question, but more of a comment. Actually,
Sure.
When I'm 30, so I've wanted to get into real estate long before, but one of the drawbacks was just the high interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
6-7 right now. But when you talked about writing off those expenses, that was new to me. I honestly didn't know that.
Really?
So yeah, I'll be honest with the group. So that's game changer for me.
Yeah, there is a limit to what you can write off every single year as a W-2 borrower, but it's still more than a renter.
Yeah.
And it's a very significant factor. All of my clients make more of their income now because they own their home as a W-2, income producer, because they have access to that write-off.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And is that across all 50 states? Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Talk to your CPA. If you're using TurboTax, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no,
but you talk to your CPA about it, and it's very easy. I think it's a, not 593, 1090 something form from your mortgage company.
Okay.
I'll send you mine so you can look at it. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, like really high level, does a lot of this apply to commercial real estate as well? Like if you're planning to rent out an office for professional service, should you be looking at buying the property instead?
It depends. No, the answer is completely different
Okay.
model, different monster altogether.
Okay.
And it depends what you're doing, because like if the use is like a warehouse, then it's a very basic tenant improvement there. And you're just doing racking and like a loading dock and like a bathroom, right? But if you're doing a medical suite, a surgery center, your TIs or tenant improvements are going to be in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And then those people stay there for like 25 years and they sell the practice normally. And then that tenant stays there. So, and then you're locked into a specific lease at a specific number because that specific niche can only afford or will only pay that specific number, right? So it's a completely different underwriting style. But it depends. I mean, if you have like a mechanic shop or something like that and it's not like crazy tenant improvements, what type of business?
Medical.
What type of medical? Aesthetics, or is it like invasive surgery?
No, mental health.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very non-invasive. That's just rooms, basically. It's drywall and doors. That's perfectly fine. But it's condos are medical condos. They don't have as much appreciation because again, it's just a medical condo, and you can only do so much with it. But if you find a slamming deal, go get it.
Can you help me?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. But it all depends on where you are. Like if I'm not the best person for it, we have to find you the best person. I don't like to operate outside of my realm because I like a certain level of quality of life.
I'm in San Diego,
Okay,
so.
perfect. Yeah, I'm sure we can help you find something. Absolutely. Any other questions, folks? Go ahead.
Just your opinion and thoughts on like buying real estate outside of the country. Would you recommend or?
For what purpose? For investment purpose or
Yeah,
vacation
that's
purpose? Like what country?
Like people are saying Dubai is like the new spot to invest in. I don't know if that's something you would engage in or.
I would look at real estate investing this way. Remember I said how I have superpowers here in San Diego? Between here and Dubai, is there a better real estate deal for you? The answer is yes. Does that make sense? Like most of the time, there's a better deal to be found between here and wherever that is. That's why like I'm not an advocate of out-of-state investing, because again, like I know I can call Robert McKinley to go and change plumbing on a specific house, but I don't know who to call in Tallahassee. And I'm gonna have to go spend hours to figure out who to call in Tallahassee. And then I might still get screwed out there. So my point is, the further away you are, the less strong you are with whatever you're investing in. And I'm a control freak, so I like to have as much control over the assets as possible. Yeah. I wouldn't make that my first investment, at least. Especially if you don't like have your own first place, I would recommend getting something for yourself first. Otherwise, that may jeopardize you getting something for yourself. And then you're back 3 steps. Any other questions, folks?
That was a very good answer.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I've said it like 10 times before. A lot of people ask me that question a lot, and it's a common thing because the marketing is so great and the appeal is so nice. I totally, like my cousin builds millionaire mansions in Antalya, Turkey. But there's no industry there, it's just tourism. So these mansions are like only for people, they're like vacant homes, right? So they don't appreciate and they don't produce income unless it's tourism. So is it necessarily a good investment? But they're gorgeous and I want to live there. You buy into the lifestyle, right? But at the end of the day, like if you start peeling back the layers and you look at the numbers, it begins to look like a bad idea. And you also have to, you're betting on like the economic success of that part of Dubai or whatever. Does that make sense?
Right.
And then at that point,
Well, it's a growing city, so like it's predicted like more people are going to go there. So start buying now and then later on it will appreciate, but it's risky.
I think there's better chances for you to find growing cities in like the States. Where do you live?
New York,
New York? Where in New York?
Long Island.
Okay, cool. I guarantee you'll find something in Staten Island, Long Island, or anywhere in New York, really. Even northern New York's blowing up as well. That's a growing market as well. Not everywhere in northern New York, but certain parts that are good investments, especially around universities. Those are solid. People are always going to be going to school. So some of the best investments that I've purchased for my clients are around universities because students pay a premium to party and have their own place. But just be prepared for that too. Go ahead.
What are some common mistakes people make around refinancing, or like what are some thoughts that people have about refinancing that aren't particularly always true? Or
Okay, so while I'm answering this, pull out your phones. We're going to do the evals on the app. So pull out your phones real quick. I need you guys to do the session. Am I doing this right? Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Yes? Just pull out your phones and then go on the app. Go on the app and then go into the session. At the bottom, there's like a session evaluation. Just fill that out real quick for me, please. I appreciate it. The answer to the question about common misconceptions about refinances is two things. It may not always make sense to refinance because there's a cost associated to refinancing.
right.
And the other thing is, like, a lot of realtors say this dumb thing, marry the house, date the rate. And that's like super volatile because like it's a very simplistic way to look at like purchasing a home. At the end of the day, if you're purchasing a home and you can afford it and it's comfortable for you long term, that's why you should be buying it. You shouldn't necessarily be buying it just because like you found the perfect home and you can barely afford it and you're hoping for a refi. So the second thing is refis cost money. Normally it's between like $5,000 and $8,000 for like a $800,000 refi. You have to make sure that the savings that you're going to save every single month from that refinance is going to, the break-even point isn't like 8 years out from the cost of what you're spending on the refi versus what you're saving every single month. So if you're saving, my clients are at 7.625% in El Cajon. Interest rates right now are like 6.125% for them. So they're saving $880 a month if they refi tomorrow, right? The cost is $5,400, right? They're gonna make that money back within like 6 months, right? But if interest rates were at like 6.8% and the savings was like $200 a month, now we're looking at like 3 to 7 years before that happens. And that just doesn't make sense. So it's probably cheaper to pay the extra amount and wait a little bit longer than to pay the extra amount and in your current interest rate and wait a little bit longer than to hope for, and then to jump into a refi. It's not like dollar cost averaging with stocks. It's not nearly the same because there's no cost associated with dollar cost averaging relatively. But in refinancing, there's very much a
What was
cost.
it that you just said? Like when in doubt, what?
When in doubt.
You didn't say that, but like
Oh,
when in doubt.
marry the date, marry the house, date the rate. Is that what you're talking about?
Is that your advice?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. Terrible advice. If a realtor says that to you, run.
Yeah, you said something about 8 years.
Oh, the break-even point. So if it's a break-even of way sooner, like 6 months or something, it totally makes sense to refinance. Your loan officer will help you understand this break-even point so that you better understand whether or not it makes sense. A good loan officer is supposed to do this math for you. A bad one's going to be like, yeah, refinance right now, and they're not going to help you understand what the cost is necessarily. Did everybody fill out their evals? I'm going to get yelled at. This is why I'm traumatized. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Any other questions, guys, before we wrap it? Go ahead.
So I'm an econ major. I recently took a class with a professor who's pretty knowledgeable, in my opinion, I guess. But what do I know? But he said that, or at least this is like the economic theory. Obviously, like it varies just because there's other factors at play. But usually, when interest rates are higher, home prices are a little bit lower, just because the volume or like the markets in certain areas are much less hot when interest rates are higher, and then like vice versa, when interest rates are lower, markets tend to be hotter because people are looking at buying houses. Do you have like thoughts on like depending on how much like cash you have to like put down, like should you, like if you have more cash to put down, like does it make sense to buy at like a higher interest rate if you have more like cash to put down just to avoid some of those interest payments? Or do you think that generally like when interest is lower, like that is the time to buy even though house prices might be higher? Does that make sense?
We're never going to see 3% or 2% interest rates again. unless the government wants to completely destroy the economy. So the average interest rate is going to be between, in a really good market, 4.5% to 5.5%. So that's where we're going to operate on, okay? We're not there right now, but we will be at some point. God willing, you're alive between now and that some point, right? So if you're going to need to live somewhere, right? So you have to address whether or not you want to purchase a place for yourself now and you can afford to purchase a place for yourself now, okay? Deciding on anything outside of what I just said doesn't necessarily make sense because you can't control a lot of those things. So at the end of the day, you really have to decide based on variables that you can control and identify, and then take action, not necessarily like waiting it out and all of these other different things that you don't necessarily know. And the other thing is like, there's a fallacy in that statement, and I didn't even know that. I always thought it was like a double helix relationship between mortgage interest rates and purchase price. I always thought that. And then COVID happened, and interest rates were super low, and prices were super high, and then prices were super high, and interest rates were super high, and I didn't know what the heck was going on. And I thought the world was falling apart because that basic principle understanding had completely been shattered. Yeah. So, though that theory in economics exists, it's still just a theory. Yeah. And it can very quickly be shattered by the second round of the Spanish flu.
Could you repeat that, like interest rate range one more time?
Oh, 4.5 to 5.5 is like a healthy. It's mostly going to be like 5%, because it has to be above what our average inflation rate is, and like most of the time the Fed doesn't. I gotta go, guys, but the Fed doesn't loan out money for free, yeah, and they can't. And it has to be above the like base interest rate, inflation rate. Yeah. Any other questions before we roll out? I'm listed by David on Instagram. Thank you all for coming.
Blow him up on his DMs, just 24/7. He's
Put me in all the group chats. I love it.
You did so good.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Thank you.
all day long. Send him cat video.